On this week's Mags on Media, ad man John Hunt in an extended interview on his novel, The Boy Who Could Keep a Swan in His Head. We'll also touch on the art of great copywriting and whether creativity is something that can be taught. Also, a look back at Hillbrow in the 60s and 70s. John Hunt is the worldwide creative chair of the advertising agency network TBWA, having previously co-founded TBWA Hunt Lascaris. He's a globally recognized figure in the advertising world and has been the guiding light behind some of the world's most iconic advertising campaigns. He's just branched out with a novel called The Boy Who Could Keep a Swan in His Head. And in an extended interview this week, he talks about the difference between writing advertising copy and books, whether creativity can be taught, mentorship, and some of his biggest advertising mistakes. John Hunt, a very warm welcome to Mags on Media. Thank you very much indeed, talking about your new books. I'm curious to know how a creative director becomes a novelist.
Well, I've always liked to do things in parallel. So I'm from that school that thinks you don't have to do one thing all the time. And I find, funny enough, the one relaxes me from the other. So the novelist part of me starts very early in the morning, and I find the novelist part of me makes me a better creative person when I come to the office.
In what respect?
It teases your mind differently, so you relaxed a little bit. Maybe some people play golf for the same end result.
The book itself, let's talk about Hillbrow. Why Hillbrow? Why is it set in Hillbrow? What special meaning does this eclectic, noisy, sometimes dirty, multi-ethnic community have on you? What's the attraction?
Well, the attraction is a very real one, not made up at all. From about the age of 8 to 20, I lived in Hillbrow, so that was my hood. Obviously, it was in the late 60s, going through the 70s.
What was it like then?
It was wonderful. I mean, wonderful in the sense that it was the most eclectic place. It was cosmopolitan. It had Germans, Italians, French, Spanish, Polish. When you came to South Africa first, that's where you stopped off. So you had this melting pot of different nationalities, knowing they were in like a stop-off place. But the restaurants, the movies, all came from a cosmopolitan kind of world. And we were, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I rolled through that. So at school, a little government school in Hillbrow, Italians, Portuguese, Polish, guys from South America.
What experiences did you collect, John?
I think you began to understand different nationalities. You understand the world isn't just South African. Remember this in the context of horrible apartheid getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But in that zone, in the 60s, in the counterculture of hippiedom, marijuana, free love, it was a very heady world, which I didn't realize was so unique because, hey, that was just good. So you collected this kind of, I think, openness. I think you lived a much more visceral life than, say, if you were down the road in, I don't know, Vanderbijl Park or something. People from outside Hillbrow driving through, somewhat with, nervously.
Windows closed, doors locked,
absolutely.
But almost like driving through the Kruger Park, I
exactly.
imagine, yeah?
You do not get out, but you point at all these funny people, which we sort of took a pride in. We're different. We got a bit of attitude here. We were kind of like the crazies. As I say, South Africa was getting more and more conservative, more and more horrible. This was the antidote. And a lot of people who were of that nature would come in. So you'd go to a coffee bar where you could have as much coffee you want and, believe it or not, play chess.
Do you remember the name?
Narnia.
Yes. Okay.
Cafe Narnia. And I think if you went to the counter and you had the right wink or the right tap of the nose or whatever, you might be served something a little more interesting with your salad. But that was Hillbrow of that time. Eclectic, dynamic, fast, fun, and music. Hundreds and, not hundreds, but many, many music stores, record bars.
Famous Hillbrow Records.
There you go. Exclusive books, Estoril, all very, very international bookstores that you could only get books there that you get nowhere else in South Africa.
And if you wanted a roast chicken, I think at 3:30 in the morning there was Fontana, wasn't there?
There was Fontana, you know, the only 24-hour restaurant, bakery in the whole of South Africa, which I remember reading an article, that's the beginning of the Antichrist, because why would you want a chicken at 3? You've been doing something wrong if you need a chicken at 3:30 in the morning.
Possibly because you'd had too much of that special salad that had been served to you at the coffee shop, John Hunt, a little earlier, but let's not go down that road. You use the word visceral, you use the word eclectic, you use the word attitude as far as the 60s, early 70s were concerned in Hillbrow. How then did that shape John Hunt the Ad Man, if it did? It must have.
You know, it's really interesting because it was only when I was writing the book that I even thought about that. And I think in retrospect, without me knowing, it shaped me a lot, because I think I was always the outsider looking in, but Hillbrow gave me an environment where that wasn't so bad. So very mediocre school, kind of, you know, my grades were never going to be particularly outstanding, but I loved writing. I could draw on my experiences in Hillbrow. I could draw on the fact that later on, when I traveled a lot and as a job, you know, was to really go around the world talking to people of different cultures. Love it. Didn't just enjoy it. Absolutely, I love speaking to French creatives, our Japanese creatives, our Brazilian creatives. So I think all that probably was seeded over that period.
I'm curious about that phrase, the outsider looking in. I wonder if that is part of a strand of the DNA that an ad man needs.
I think so. I think by and large, we don't represent the status quo. So our job 9 times out of 10 is actually to disrupt it. So if you're too much of the center, well, you have to understand it, but if you understand it and accept it as, you know, let's behave, let's bow to the status quo, you end up with all things mediocre.
More with ad man John Hunt and his new book, The Boy Who Could Keep a Swan in His Head, when Mags on Media continues.